Great, then without any further ado, I will begin. So capital projects grant application intake is now open for 2023. I will go over a little bit what's new in it, do a little overview about what the program is, organization eligibility, project eligibility, financials, how the applications are assessed and scored, a little bit of the rules about how you can spend the grant, and then we'll do how to actually apply for the grant and some more resources. So before we get into it, I would like to acknowledge that today I'm coming to you from the lands of the Lekwungen people, who are known today as the Esquimalt and Songhees nations. I would like to gratefully thank them for the stewardship of this land, on which I am grateful for the opportunity to live and work, connect with my community, and to find ways to participate in acts of ongoing reconciliation. And I know this is being broadcast across the province, so if you would like to enter into the chat at all, what land you're coming to us from, that would be lovely to have those acknowledgements as well. All right, so what is new for 2023? We have made some changes to the program this year. So key changes, we added a fourth category of eligible capital projects to include the repatriation of Indigenous cultural belongings and ancestral remains. Other minor changes that we've made, reference to COVID-19 has been removed from the guidelines as things have opened back up across the province. We have updated the award notification date for the capital projects. It used to be late fall and we didn't really have a hard date. So we put that down as December 31st as the final date that you will hear. Hopefully it will be sooner, but there is a hard date on that now. We had a lot of questions over the last few years about IT projects and what kind qualified. So we've clarified about IT projects being eligible. So software purchases, including installation, training, creating websites, etc. So those are an eligible acquisition project. And then we've just provided a little bit of additional information on how the applications are assessed and scored. We've moved a few things around within the guidelines to make that a bit clearer, just for increased transparency. So now to an overview of the program itself. So Community Gaming Grants itself is a fairly large provincial funder, and our capital projects grant is a smaller component of the overall grants that we provide. Capital project grants are a $5 million budget. They help not-for-profits with capital projects and acquisitions. This application is a competitive grant process because the budget is limited. Every year we get a lot more requests for funding than what we're able to fund. So some of the guidelines around it are that projects should cost between $20,000 and up to $1.25 million. And the grant can provide between 20% and 50% of the total project cost. So grants between $20,000 and up to $250,000 are provided. The applicants must have matching funds available when they apply. PACs are eligible to apply as well. It's open to all of the 6 sectors that can apply for the main Community Gaming Grants program. And the organizational structural eligibility is also the same of that. So successful applicants will also get the amount that they've applied for. So what you put down on the application, you'll either get that or you won't be funded. That's a little bit different from our regular program where you could get any amount. Right, so a bit more of an overview. The application intake this year is for June 5th to August 3rd. And then the final notification date, again, be December 31st. Applicants can submit one request per year and just one grant per project. You can still apply for our regular, the annual community gaming grant to support your ongoing programming. Just one application, one project application per year. There should only be one lead in the application. So if you're doing this in partnership, you need to choose one organization to be the lead to submit the application, and that organization would be handling all of the money and all of the reporting. Yeah, and just like our regular applications, this capital project grant does have its own intake guide that gets updated every year. And we've just got the 2023 guidelines posted on the website. So back to these applications are being competitively assessed. So we wait until we've received all of the applications until they get scored. So it is really important to put forward a strong application. Look through the guidelines, make sure that you've got everything on the checklist there. Submit it on time. The intake for capital projects opens on the opening date, and when it's closed, you actually can't access it, so it will be unavailable. You cannot apply as a late application. And make sure that you provide complete, accurate documentation and information. You cannot send anything else by email after the fact. Again, so I think I mentioned we update the program guidelines annually. This is the main policy document for the capital project grants. To say what all the eligibility criteria is. We do post in there at the beginning what the new changes are for the year, and you're encouraged to read through of these. They also include like your application checklist, so a list of everything you have, instructions for filling out the applications. It's all within the actual capital project grant guidelines. All right, so on to the organization eligibility. So this comes to organizational structure. And again, as I mentioned, this is the same as for our regular grants program. So successful applicants will be a not-for-profit organization operating primarily for community benefit. Deliver or support programs within one of our sectors, have an open, accessible membership with a volunteer board that is democratically elected, not paid for their services. We have gotten a lot of questions about what an open membership is, and I will just say when there is restrictions on who can be a member or any kind of access or inclusion, this is considered when there's a rational connection between the primary purpose of an organization and the membership restriction. So if that exists, just include a note as to why, how that relates to what you're doing. So for example, if the primary purpose of a not-for-profit is the promotion of interests and welfare of an identifiable group or class of persons characterized by physical, mental disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, if the organization grants preference to a member of the above noted group or class in a good faith, and there's a rational connection between what that preference is and their work or purpose. So for example, I've seen organizations that primarily they do programming to support people with visual impairments, and they want to make sure a certain amount of people on the boards have lived experience with visual impairments. That would be something that would be considered to make sure that that representation is there. Ineligible organizations would be for-profit organizations. That includes any of these community contribution companies, Co-ops, unless they're designated as a community benefit co-op. Member-funded societies. So that doesn't mean that you collect membership fees. That means that you've made a conscious choice to select that in applying for society membership, and that your members are actually shareholders who can be paid out from profits every year, or paid out if it winds up. Political parties, action party, lobby groups, we cannot fund. Also any level of government, whether it be federal, provincial, regional, municipal, or First Nation government, or any body of a level of government. So that would include provincially or municipally operated facilities like healthcare facilities, educational facilities, libraries, museums, if they are an arm of a level of government. So educational institutions and schools are also included in that, and also religious institutions are not eligible. Well, religious institutions often operate as nonprofits in the sense that they're not generating a profit and operate for community benefit. I'll just say most of them are generally not eligible by default due to the structural requirements, like having a board of directors that are voted in by an open membership, the same way that other not-profits are. However, there are some not-for-profit organizations that are affiliated with religious institutions, and those would be eligible if they meet our other eligibility requirements. Go on here. So to assess the eligibility of an organization, we require constitution and bylaws, which will lay out your purposes and your rules of operating, or comparable. So something comparable to a constitution might be a mandate. Those do need to be. You don't have to be a registered charity or an incorporated society, but if you are, you have to be in good standing, and we'll use the letters of incorporation that you've submitted for that as they're stamped by that authority. And we'll look for a board of directors list to see the names of your board members and contact information in case we need to reach out with any questions. Also, their addresses let us know that at least 2/3 of the board are residing in BC. And the minutes from the most recent AGM, or whichever meeting you hold your elections at. That is just to demonstrate that you do have democratic election of the board. All right, on to project eligibility. What kinds of things are we funding here with this $5 million? So, as I mentioned, we added a category. We now have 4 categories. The first is facilities, so construction of new facilities, or very often renovation or major maintenance of existing facilities. So purchasing a new or used building, community or childcare facility, recovery houses, interior or exterior renovations. So we see a lot of applications for kitchen, bathroom renovations, maybe some new flooring, new roof, installing a new HVAC system. I know we've done some elevators, enclosed sports facilities too, like tennis or soccer bubbles. Or it could even be installing lighting. We've done some curling club refrigeration projects too. Community infrastructure is development of public amenities that improve the residents' quality of life. So some examples of that would be playgrounds, outdoor structures, community space, skate parks, hiking or walking trails, public wharfs. I think we've even funded some ecosystem restorations, which is kind of a neat take on infrastructure. And then acquisitions is purchase of fixed capital assets for long-term ownership and use by the applicant. So things like vehicles, right? Maybe you need some buses to transport people or vans. Again, into the IT software, IT projects, office, technical equipment, audio-visual equipment, sports equipment, boats, things like that. So these are your big ticket acquisitions that aren't things that you typically buy every year. And then the fourth category that is new is repatriation projects. So repatriation of Indigenous cultural belongings and or ancestral remains. So an example of this may be a community museum returning artifacts to the nation of origin, or ancestral remains that have been discovered or returned to the community or family from where they came. And hopefully we'll have more examples in future years because this is brand new to us. So applicants would choose one of these categories that they think it best fits under and apply on that. We don't fund research or development. We fund hard assets. And each project category has its own eligibility criteria. So things like if you are doing a renovation of a facility, you need to prove that either you own it or you have a long-term lease, you have permission to do the work on it. Same with community infrastructure. If you don't own the land, you need to prove that you do have the authorization to do that work if it's public land. For the repatriation projects, so this is when you're ready to go. Again, we're not funding the research part of it. It is when you have identified objects and you know where they're supposed to go. We'll fund transportation of materials, travel of people, and the ceremonies that go with that, but not the research that goes into trying to find where the home is. Oh, and I'll give you some more information here too. So the project has to be undertaken by an eligible organization and demonstrate community benefit. Projects should be accessible to the public upon completion or reasonably accessible. And facilities and community infrastructure, as I noted, should be on land owned by the organization is applying or leased to them on a long-term basis, or public land. Acquisitions, you should be able to show how it's necessary for the delivery of a program or service. And the acquisition purchased by the applicant will come through and provide some kind of community benefit. It's not just for one person to use. If the project is for the purchase of a privately owned fixed capital asset for long-term use, it has to, that privately owned is by the society or the organization applying. It has to fully belong to that eligible organization. So you can't purchase an asset for someone else and say, well, we get to use it. A little bit more for repatriation. So not-for-profit organizations can apply to either receive or send these Indigenous cultural belongings or ancestral remains. Research, negotiations, determination regarding ownership must be completed prior to applying and have some type of signed documentation confirming the intention to repatriate the materials from one place to another should be provided with the application. If the applicant for funding is acting on behalf of another party involved, a letter of support should be provided as well. So we've tried to make that a bit more open, just knowing that we don't fund levels of government as well. So if there is a nation that is looking to receive some items back, they can have a third-party nonprofit acting on their behalf doing this, but we will need that letter of support to confirm that they are indeed acting on behalf of the other two parties. All right, and we will go into financial eligibility then, a little bit of a shift. So anyone who's applied for a community gaming grant, some of this will be old news, but we'll go through it anyway. We may have some new applicants in the call today. So organizations have to have a separate gaming account. So this would be a checking account that is designated only for their gaming funds. And you need to provide a void gaming account check with the application. That is so that we can do the direct deposit. We do need evidence that you have checks as well. We don't take the direct deposit forms. You should have matching funds available to complete the project. So this means the matching funds contribution should be equal to or exceed the level of funding that's being requested. Either have it on hand or you can have like a loan statement or conditional letter of commitment to that. But vague or unclear kind of letters of support, they're not accepted. It needs to be very clear that you have the money either on hand or promised upon approval of the grant. You should use any of your restricted funds that you've put away for the project. So if you've been saving up to buy a new van and you've been restricting funds, you should definitely show those, that those are some of your matching funds, and have that clearly shown on your financial statements. And if you are a past recipient of community gaming grants or a capital project grant, you must be up to date on your reporting with us with those gaming account summary reports. So if you've missed sending in one of those, then that's going to impact your application. All right, so the things that we look at on our end to determine the financial eligibility is a revenue and expense statement for your previous fiscal year. So that is the most recently complete at the time of application. A balance sheet for that previous fiscal year. A budget for the current year and any accompanying notes to the financial statements. So we look at the financial information in order to determine if you have financial capacity to proceed with the project. If you do have any of those matching funds there, the information is the same as what's required for our other community gaming grants, program grants. You don't need to have audited statements. We'll accept many different levels, but you must provide the highest level that you have. So don't hold anything back. If you have audited statements, great, send them. If you don't, if maybe you only have compilation or review engagement, if you have that, send it. Don't just send us an internally prepared statement if you have audited statements available. However, if that is all that you use for your organization, then that's sufficient too. All right, so a bit more information on assessment and scoring, where we did make some updates to increase transparency. So applicants must meet all of the mandatory eligibility criteria to have the project assessed. So we look at them in stages. We look at the organization eligibility. Do you meet that criteria? We look at the project eligibility. Is the project itself eligible? And the financial eligibility. Do you have those matching funds available? Does it look like you'll be able to proceed with it? If you meet that mandatory criteria, it then moves on to be scored against the assessment criteria. And this is where the scoring comes in, where it gets compared to the other applications. So then once that ranking process is completed, there is additional considerations that may be applied just to make sure that we have a good representation across all the sectors. Regional distribution, so across the province, make sure we have some inclusion of Indigenous projects, that kind of thing. We don't want all of the money to go to one city in the province, because I'm sure that many other people would be disappointed that their region or their city didn't get any funding. So what does this assessment and scoring look like? So, and there is a table in the guidelines that's just being expanded on this year. So community benefit is worth 20% of the score. So you need to describe your project. Why is it needed? and how will your community benefit from it. So you can talk about what people are in your community that are likely to benefit. How many people? You can include evidence of community support for your project. So who's helping with the project or who's helping even with your programming? How many people are involved? Or describe any gaps in service in your community and how this will address that. Inclusiveness and accessibility is another 5%. So just showing that it's open or inclusive to as many people as possible. So you could talk about the number and the populations of people who will directly benefit. Just basically going over that. Project feasibility is worth 25%. So we do want to see that there's a sound plan in place to ensure the project starts after funding is provided and that it's completed on time. So information that we're looking for in this section will cover the project timeline, risk assessments. We should have a risk management plan in place. Even if you don't think there's risks, even for things like acquisition, we've seen applications for a vehicle per se, and they said we don't need a risk plan. We're going to buy a car. Well, there was a time where you couldn't really get the cars that you were looking at because they were out of stock. That was a risk that hadn't been thought of. So really think through that risk assessment and make sure that you have a way to mitigate anything that could happen. Approvals and permits. Make sure you have any appropriate approvals or permits at least identified. If you can't get them all by the time the application is submitted, at least telling us that you know exactly what approvals you need and what the timeline is, and that you've already applied or when you can apply. And ongoing operational viability. So how are you going to make sure that this project is maintained long term, whether it's a facility or even something like, a smaller acquisition, like how are you going to maintain it and make sure you don't need to replace it again in 1 year or 2 years. State of title or license to occupy, that is more for facilities to prove that either you own that property or that you have that lease in place and you have the permission. So a letter of support written isn't really enough. We need to see that lease information or the title. And I'll just go into the thing about viability, ongoing viability and risk management. So we talked about we want to make sure that you can start it on time, that you can finish it on time. Successful applicants have to begin the project within 12 months of receiving the funding, and the project should be complete within 36 months for 3 years. So that's the kind of timelines that we're looking at for that. Financial considerations are a pretty hefty chunk of the score here at 45%. So not only do we want to see a viable plan to execute the project, we do want to see solid numbers on the financial aspect. So here is where we would assess the total project's cost and budget and how much grant funds are requested to complete the project. So that between 20 and 50% we had mentioned that we could request. How will the grant funds be used toward eligible expenses? And making sure that those matching funds are in place. So really documenting that. Things like if you have the matching funds, that should be shown on your balance sheet. If you have a loan or a line of credit from your bank, including that paperwork. If you have a letter of commitment, maybe a community foundation or another grant program has said you have conditional approval if you get this grant. Have that in writing, right? So 45% of the score is quite a bit. You don't want to just say that you have the money. You definitely want to show that you meet that criteria there. Project costs, so things like estimates So we know that's how much the project's going to cost. Having that project budget in place. And definitely saying exactly how you prepare to use the grant funds when you get them. What exactly do you plan to use it for? Is it for architectural drawings? Is it for hiring contractors? Is it to purchase the goods? And then finally, we have environmental efficiency is worth 5%. So any climate action or energy efficient features, you can get points for that. So anything that might reduce the organization's greenhouse gas emissions, lower their long-term operational expenses, such as heating, cooling costs, or improve the use of human or technological resources like reduced resource consumption. It might not be applicable to all projects, but applicants can note if it's not applicable and why. But definitely think about it and see if it applies to you. If there's any kind of efficiencies there, include that information and get that 5%. All right, so you have applied and you've got notification now that you were successful. How do you spend the grant? Appropriate use of funds would be to cover costs directly related to and necessary for implementing the approved project. You can't redirect the money to other programs or things that you're doing. It is for this project. So eligible expenses would be like project-related fees to professionals, technical personnel, consultants, contractors, project materials, transportation and shipping costs, licenses, permits, insurance, or any other direct necessary costs incurred, as long as it is specific to the project and it is needed for the implementation. It should be in there. Again, it's for when the project is shovel ready, so not for any kind of research ahead of time into it. Should we build a new building or should we not? Feasibility studies not. Architectural drawings, that would be. And don't redirect it to the other programs. You have to use it for the project. If it's a similar project, like it changes partway through, but it's very similar, you may be able to do that, but write into us and let us know about any changes so we can provide that approval in writing. So we will also deposit the grant funds into that gaming account that we mentioned, that we asked that you open. And eligible expenses should be paid directly from that account whenever possible. If you need to pay out of your operating or your general account, you may transfer the grant funds either electronically or by check from the gaming account to that general operating account. But you do need to keep that documented. What was the date of the transfer? What was the amount? What was it for? So you can do these by check or board approved EFT. If you're doing those EFTs, you need a note, something documented from the board saying that they approve EFTs from the gaming account for a dollar amount, like a maximum dollar amount and purposes. And hang on to your invoices and your receipts for 5 years in case of an audit. And again, as mentioned, projects must start within 12 months of getting the grant, and they should be spent within 36 months. We want to see those projects being completed. Financial reporting. So anyone that gets our regular program funding will know we have gaming account summary reports. So if you've previously received a grant and still have money in your gaming account, you have to submit one of these reports. If you get a capital projects grant, you have to submit these reports. There is also an additional capital project supplement that you would attach for this specific grant, and it just shows that money coming in and going out a little bit separately. so that we know that it was spent on the project and not moved around to some of the other programs that you might also be funded for. And this reporting is done based on the applicant's fiscal year. So after your fiscal year ends, you have 90 days to submit this. And so we just look at this capital project grant supplement to make sure the expenses that you've lined out on there, what you spent the money on, is comparable to what you've indicated in the grant application. And then I'll just show some examples. If you're not familiar with the gaming account summary report, this is what it looks like. A little bit like a tax form, but it's really not that scary. There's a few key areas: opening balance, grant received, spending out. So, and we do have a tutorial for it and a sample of a filled one on our website as well. Or you can give us a call if you need help filling it out. So that's the end of it. There's a section here for community benefit where you can say how the grant funding, improved community life. And then the last section is just a place for the board members to sign off. So at least 2 board members to sign off on it. Hopefully the treasurer as well. You've got one of those, they can sign off. And then this is what the capital project supplement looks like. So it'll say, what day did you receive the grant? And then it's sort of like a 3-year thing, how much is left in the gaming account on year 1, year 2, year 3. So if it does take you the full 3 years, you'll be sending this in. If you get the project done in 1 year, it'll just be the 1 year and it'll balance out to 0 at the end. Once you have completed a project, we also ask for project completion report. So just send us an email, say it's done. Give us a breakdown of the total expenses, even the things that you like, the total, not just for the gaming. And we'd love to see some photos of it. We may even request that some of the photos be used to publicize the outcomes. We do have some media announcements sometimes, also our guidelines, documents themselves, and our annual report that comes out every fall. We love to show where this money went. So we do ask for photos, and we may follow up and ask for permission to publish some of those. So all of this sounds great. Now you say, well, how the heck do I apply for it? Well, it is an online application. You apply online at our website. There's a link there. You can also get assistance at all Service BC locations. They have a copy of all of our guidelines. They have those access terminals. They can help you do it. If you have paper documents and you need them scanned and attached to your application for you, they can help you with that too. So this is just to kind of go through and show where you click on our website. Some folks do get lost. So down here, online service. Then you would click on launch online service. We do have tutorials as well that show these screenshots, so I highly recommend that. And then once you launch it, you want to stay away from the middle section. There's a lot of information in there that is good to know, but don't click those links. You want to stay on the left-hand side under where it says apply online. This is where you select the type of grant that you want to apply for. So you'll select the capital project grants there, and then it'll launch you into the application there. It'll ask for your LNG number if you've applied before. If you have not ever applied for a community gaming grant or a capital project grant, you've never submitted an application, please do give us a call because we'll need to enter your information in so that you can create a profile so you can apply. And then applying for the grant. So as I mentioned, this opened on Monday, June 5th. It will close August 3rd. Apply online. We do not accept paper applications. Any of these supporting documents have to be attached to the application itself. So you can't email it or mail it in after the fact. New applicants should contact us. So we're going to ask for your BC Society number if you have one, when you started operating, what your fiscal year end is, obviously your organization name, address, things like that, so we can set you up in our system. I do highly recommend that you look through the guidelines and any of the resources on our website. We do have a frequently asked questions specific to capital project grants. Again, I mentioned the application tutorials. I find those really helpful because they do have those screenshots. So if you have that open, well, like before you even apply, you can see what is it going to ask you, and then it can kind of help guide you through the application process. And we have sample documents, like sample financial statements. Maybe you're not sure if what you have already for your organization, if that's sufficient. You can go on there and look and see what our samples are. And those will just show what we need in terms of information. You're free to come up with your own formatting, all of that. Other general tips and advice, again, read the guidelines. Use that pre-application checklist. It's within the guidelines itself. It's really handy. We've tried to tie it into the assessment sheet this year, so you can look through that assessment and see what documents are needed for each section of assessment. Look at any of our resources. One big tip, save any of your required documents that you want to attach. The application can accept Word, PDF, Excel, and JPEG. So save any of that in a folder on your desktop so that it's really easy to access when you're doing the application. You're not trying to find, where did I save that on my computer? Like, it's all there in a folder that says, you know, gaming application. And you can definitely call us. We have grant analysts picking up the phone every day. You can email us. I'll provide the outreach email at the end of the presentation here. And again, if you are an existing applicant with us, make sure that your gaming account summary reports are all submitted and up to date, because you don't want that to be the difference. Maybe you're tied with another application, but you have a late report and they don't. And you don't want that to come between you and your funding. So some resources here. Community Gaming Grants branch, you can reach us. We'll put a link to our website up there. General questions can go to Community Gaming Grants at gov.bc.ca. You can also ask for like special approvals at that email. Maybe you've got your capital project funding and something's changed. Can we buy this car instead of that car? We're still buying a car. There's our phone number there. If you have a quick question and you want to get through to a grant analyst at 356-1081. Then to contact with outreach here, so myself or our policy team, you can reach us at cggoutreach@gov.bc.ca. Also, wonderful Kalina here who set up this presentation for us, or any of the other board and volunteers at the BCACG. So they're there for you. They represent charities and community groups, and they're there for you. I put a link to their website there, or you can email them at gamingquestions@bcacg.com. Or if you are out in the regions, we also have these community charitable gaming associations that are all over the province here. So they do the same work as BCACG. They are helping nonprofits access these grants, and we've got branches in Dawson Creek, Prince George. I think Kelowna's missing from there, but we do have them in Kelowna, Chilliwack, Victoria, Comox Valley, and of course Vancouver. So I've put up their websites there. If you're on the BCACG website, they do also there's a page there where find a location, so you can go there and find a location near you. So they're regionally based. They're going to support their local charities with their applications. Definitely reach out to them as well. And I think that is it. We are open for questions, should you have any.